Cheese! There, with just a click of a button, I'll have that moment saved in time forever. With technology, it's nearly impossible to completely erase information. It was, however, a different story 70 years ago. History was nearly erased for approximately 4,000 German soldiers that were held at the POW camp in Concordia, Kansas. Of the 8 POW camps in Kansas during World War II, Camp Concordia was the largest, and all but a trace of this camp literally vanished into cropland in only a few decades. The POW Camp Concordia Preservation Society organized to restore the camp and to preserve its history. Join me now as we follow the steps that they took to transform a field of corn and several old buildings into the POW Camp Concordia Museum. Looking back over the time period of 1943 to 1945, we'll learn about this camp and about the role to fill the void in the workforce during World War II and its influence on the democracy after the war ended. The restoration of Camp Concordia was a large task which began with a small suggestion from a high school teacher. The 50th anniversary of the closing of this camp was to occur on November the 3rd, 1995. And a high school teacher suggested that a community event be held to observe this significant date, and a committee was formed. A member of the committee, Lowell May, volunteered to write a book just in time for the event. And the historical facts that he researched motivated those on the committee to think of ways that they could further preserve the history of this camp. When Lowell May went to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., he learned that most of the POW records of the nation had been destroyed, and so he was only able to locate some incomplete POW rosters. He did in the process, though, find one book that was compiled of reports and photos, and that was titled The History of Camp Concordia from Site Survey to Deactivation, and this book would become a major influence in his research. Lowell May also interviewed people connected with the camp. These were to include former guards, farmers who had had POW labor on their camps, and he also corresponded with former POWs. And in 2.5 years, he did have his book finished in time for the event, and it was titled Camp Concordia, German POWs in the Midwest. After the event was held, the committee all agreed that their next project would be the preservation of the camp and its history. That is when they formally organized into a nonprofit and called themselves the POW Camp Concordia Preservation Society. And they would spend the next 20 years working and organizing to create the museum, which they did, and it was completed, and they had their grand opening on July the 11th, 2015. And when you visit Camp Concordia today, there's a single stone guard tower that stands on its original location. And although it's reconstructed, when you walk up to the tower, you can still get the feeling of the guards up there when they once watched over the camp. And you can get the feeling of being there in 1943. You can pull your car up there and get out and walk right up to it. The German POWs arrived at this camp in the summer of 1943. By their own report, they were treated well and fed well. They had time to play, and they had time to engage in hobbies such as painting. The POWs gave away some of their paintings as gifts, and later some of those paintings were donated to the museum, and you can see them there. POWs also were put to work in the community, filling that critical loss in the workforce due to the war. And many farmers had been unsure how they would finish their harvests. And the POW farm labor was a successful answer to their problem. According to the Geneva Convention, however, enlisted POWs could be forced to work only if they were paid. And officer POWs could not be forced to work. They could choose to work, but they couldn't be forced. The pay was minimal, $1.60 a day. Officers could earn a little bit more on a monthly basis. In War History Online, in an article titled German and Italian World War II POWs in Kansas, we learned that most POWs working on farms actually had been farmers themselves before the war in Germany, and that they gained most of their appreciation for the American way of life by working on farms alongside the Kansas farmers. An important aspect of the POW camp experience was to remove the Nazi influence and to replace it with a democratic influence. And one of the major strategies behind this was establishing a college university at the camp. Accreditation was provided by the University of Kansas for this college, which was known as the Prisoner of War University, Concordia, Kansas. Later, a German university would join the accreditation also in order to transfer credits so that these POWs could use these credits towards degrees. Over 300 courses were offered, and they were taught by the German officers. The students received formal certificates that they completed, and you can see one of these original certificates there at the museum as well. Some of the teachers formally requested the opportunity to learn about democracy so that they could bring this philosophy back home with them to Germany. Their request was considered, and before returning home to Germany, a group of POW officers were selected from this camp and sent to Washington, D.C. for approximately 30 days, where they received intensive instruction on the democratic form of government. Today, we've retraced the many steps it took to recreate the POW Camp Concordia camp and the museum that stands there today. We've seen how each step led to what is now this incredible history museum. And we've also seen how the German POWs were influenced in the American way of life and democracy, not only through the classes that they received, but also through working on the farms alongside the American families. I hope this year, before it's over, that you'll take time in your journeys to visit POW Camp Concordia. As the familiar quote by Lao Tzu says, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." At less than 100 miles from Wamego, Concordia is a journey of far less than 1,000 miles and is an incredible piece of World War II history, just waiting to be discovered by you. For more information, you can go to powcampconcordia.org.